Warmly welcome to this seminar on the situation in Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and it's called The Fresh Perspectives on Building Peace in Eastern DRC. And this seminar is in cooperation between the Christian Democratic Party and the Social Democratic Party, and also together with Life and Peace Institute, the Nordic Africa Institute, Kvinna till Kvinna, Diakonia, and PMU. And I hope that I've remembered all of your all different organizations. My name is Desiree Petrus, and I'm a member of parliament for the Christian Democratic Party. And I've been in the Foreign Committee, but now I'm also in the European Union Committee in this parliament. Katarina Köhler, who will summarize in the end of this seminar, is from the Social Democratic Party, and we are together host for this seminar here in the Parliament. I'm following the situation in DRC, and not long time ago, Dr. Dennis Mukwege visited us here in the Parliament and told us about sexual violence in DRC, and that we need to do everything we can to stop the violence. And I hope that we today will get more knowledge how to create a better future for people of DRC. We need to do all we can to promote peace and security for all, and also to see more of development in DRC. The situation in DRC is terrible in many aspects. The Congolese civil war, beginning in 1996, has devastated the country and also involved 9 African nations in the region. We have UN peacekeeping troops, and still the result is death of 5.4 million people since 1998. Most of the deaths are, though, related to bad living conditions. And that is also, of course, because of war or conflict and lack of development. DRC is a country rich of national resources and could be a flourishing country, but it is one of the poorest in the world. According to Human Development Index, DR Congo has a low level, is on a low level of human development ranking, as for number 186 out of 187. And this is, of course, because of different reasons, but it's political instability, war and conflicts, lack of infrastructure, and a vast corruption. Many women in DRC lack basic rights in their everyday life. Sexual violence hit many women and stigmatized them in their family and villages, and they are often abandoned by their families. Lack of social and political rights, lack of health care, as maternal health is a problem for the whole country, and improvement is necessary for the future. I here today look forward to listen to different speakers, and they will be presented later on by our moderator, Elina Suiri. Maybe you should stand up, our moderator. Elina, you're very welcome. She's the director of the Nordic Africa Institute. But first, we will listen to Séverine Autesserre. I'm not maybe saying it's right, but Séverine, you're associate professor at Columbia University and a renowned international Congo expert. And please welcome Mrs. Autesserre.
I've been told to wait for the signal that I can start because they are filming the event, so I'm waiting. I got the signal. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thanks to all of you for being here today. We all know why this meeting is important. The Congo rarely hits the headlines, but the facts speak for themselves. The Congolese conflict is the deadliest conflict since World War II. It has caused almost 4 million deaths so far. It has destabilized most of Central Africa for the past 18 years. It is the largest ongoing humanitarian crisis in the world. And that's why I first went to Congo in 2001. I was a young humanitarian aid worker, and I met this woman who was my age. She was called Isabel. Local militias had attacked Isabel's village. They had killed many men, they had raped many women, they had looted everything. And then they wanted to take Isabel, but her husband stepped in and he said, no, please don't take Isabel, take me instead. So he had gone to the forest with the militias, and Isabel had never seen him again. It's because of people like Isabel and her husband that we need to understand how to better help the Congo build peace and security. And when we think about Congo, there is a story that we have all heard, and it's a story about minerals and rape. Policy statements and media reports both usually focus on the primary cause of violence in Congo, the illegal exploitation and trafficking of natural resources, and on the main consequence, sexual abuse of women and girls as a weapon of war. Not that these two issues aren't important and tragic, they are. But today, I want to tell you a different story. I want to tell you a story that emphasizes one of the core causes of the ongoing violence. Continuing violence in Congo is in large part driven by local bottom-up conflicts that international peace efforts have failed to help address. And the story starts from the fact that not only is Congo notable for being the world's worst ongoing humanitarian crisis, but it is also home to some of the largest international peace-building efforts in the world. Congo hosts the largest, most expensive United Nations peacekeeping mission in the world. It was also the site of the first European-led peacekeeping mission ever. And for its first cases, the International Criminal Court chose to prosecute Congolese warlords. And so in 2006, when Congo held the first free national elections in its history, many observers saw that an end to violence in the region had finally come. The international community lauded the successful organization of these elections as finally an example of successful international intervention in a failed state. But the eastern provinces have continued to face massive population displacement and horrific human rights violations. Shortly before I went back there last summer, there was a horrible massacre in South Kivu. 33 people were killed. They were mostly women and children, and many of them were hacked to death. And the more recent news on Congo similarly emphasized a lot of continuing human rights violations, killing, looting, rapes, and atrocities. Even worse, over the past 8 years, fighting in the eastern provinces has regularly reignited full-scale civil and international war. Basically, every time we feel that we are on the brink of peace, the conflict explodes again. Why? Why have the massive international peace efforts failed to help Congo achieve lasting peace and security? My answer to this question revolves around two central findings. First, one of the main reasons for the continuation of violence in Congo is fundamentally local. And when I say local, I really mean at the level of the individual, the family, the clan, the municipality, the community, sometimes the ethnic group. For instance, you remember the story of Isabel that I told you? Well, the reason why the rebels had attacked Isabel's village, raped so many of her friends, killed so many of her neighbors, was because the rebels wanted to take the land that the villagers needed to cultivate food and to survive. My second central observation is that the international peace efforts have failed to help address local conflicts because of the presence of a dominant peace-building culture. What I mean is that Western and African diplomats, United Nations peacekeepers, donors, the staff of most non-governmental organizations involved in the resolution of conflict, all of these people share a specific way of seeing the world. And I was one of these people, and I shared this culture. So I know all too well how powerful it is. Throughout the world, and throughout conflict zones, this common culture shapes our understanding of the causes of violence as primarily located in the national and international realms. It shapes our understanding of the path toward peace as requiring top-down intervention to address national and international tensions. And it shapes our understanding of the roles of foreign actors as engaging in national and international peace processes. Even more importantly, this common culture enables international peace builders to ignore the micro-level tensions that so often jeopardize macro-level peace settlements. So for instance, in Congo, because of how they are trained, diplomats, donors, the staff of the United Nations, of most non-governmental and international organizations, all of these people interpret continued fighting and massacre as a top-down problem. To them, the violence they see is the consequence of national and international tensions, tensions between President Kabila and various national opponents, and tensions between Congo, Rwanda, and Uganda. And in addition, these international interveners view local conflicts as simply the result of national and international tensions, insufficient state authority, and the Congolese people's so-called inherent propensity for violence. The dominant culture also shaped the international actors' understanding of their role. It constructs elections at the national and at the national and provincial levels as the only natural, legitimate task for United Nations staffers and diplomats. Elections have become a sort of cure-all, along with national and international peace settlements, and it happens not only in Congo, but also in many other conflict zones. But let's dig deeper into the other main causes of violence. In Congo, continuing conflict and violence is motivated not only by the national and regional tensions, but also by long-standing bottom-up agendas, whose main instigators are villagers, traditional chiefs, community chiefs, ethnic leaders. Many conflicts revolve around political, social, economic stakes that are distinctively local. For instance, there is a lot of competition at the level of the village or the district over who can be chief of village or chief of the territory according to traditional law, and who can control the distribution of land and the exploitation of local mining sites. This competition often results in localized fighting, say in one village or territory, and quite frequently it escalates into generalized fighting, so across a whole province and even at times into neighboring countries. So a lot of the violence in Congo is not coordinated on a large scale. Let's take, for example, the conflict between the Congolese of Rwandan descent and the indigenous communities of the Kivus. This conflict started in the 1930s, during Belgian colonization, because each camp competed over local access to land and to local power. The conflict escalated in 1960, after Congolese independence, because each camp allied with national politicians in order to advance their local agendas. And at the time of the 1994 genocide in Rwanda, these local actors allied with Congolese and Rwandan armed groups, but still to advance their local agendas around land and local power. And since then, these local disputes have led to conflicts many times that have jeopardized the national and international peace settlements. So we can wonder why, in these circumstances, the international peace interveners have failed to help support local conflict resolution. And the answer is that international peace builders usually view local conflict management as an unimportant, unfamiliar, and unmanageable task. The very idea of becoming involved at the local level clashes fundamentally with existing cultural norms, and it threatens key organizational interests. For instance, The very idea of the United Nations, the very identity of the United Nations as a macro-level international organization would be upended if it were to refocus on local conflicts. And as a result, there has been very little attention and efforts made to support local conflict resolution. And there have been only a few exceptions up to now. And what's fascinating is that this analysis can help us better understand many cases of lasting conflicts and international intervention failures in Africa and elsewhere. Local conflicts sustain violence in many war and post-war environments, and that happens from Afghanistan to Sudan to Timor-Leste. And in the rare cases where there have been comprehensive bottom-up peace-building initiatives, these initiatives have been successful in making peace sustainable. One of the best examples is the contrast between the relatively peaceful situation in Somaliland, which benefited from sustained grassroots peace-building initiatives, and the violence prevalent in the rest of Somalia, where peace-building has been mostly top-down. And there are several other cases in which local conflict resolution has made a crucial difference, for instance, in Northern Ireland and in South Africa. So, if we want international peace-building to work, in addition to any top-down intervention, conflicts must be resolved from the bottom up. And again, my argument is not that national and international tensions don't matter. They do. And it's not that national and international peace-building is unnecessary. It is. Instead, my argument is that both macro-level and micro-level peace-building are needed to make peace sustainable. And local organizations, local authorities, civil society representatives should be the main actors in the bottom-up process. But there are obstacles. Local actors often lack the funding and the logistical means to implement effective local conflict resolution programs. So, international actors, including Swedish agencies, should help support local conflict resolution. And so, as for Congo, what can we do, and what can Sweden do for Congo? Well, after 2 decades of conflict and the deaths of millions, it is clear that we need to change approach. Based on my field research, I believe that international and Congolese actors should pay more attention to 2 very important topics. It's land conflict and the promotion of intercommunity reconciliation. For example, in the Kivus, the Life and Peace Institute and its Congolese partners have organized intercommunity forums to discuss the specifics of local conflicts over land. And these forums have found solutions to help manage the violence. That's the kind of program that is so sorely needed throughout Eastern Congo. And it's with programs like these that we can help people like Isabel and her husband. These will not be magic wands, but because they take into account deeply rooted causes of the violence, they could definitely be game changers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Séverine. Very thought-provoking and absolutely interesting. I think we have a very interesting audience here who will be able to comment and give you questions later on. As said, my name is Iina Soiri. This one is far away from me. I'm too short. And I first would like to thank the hosts, Desiree from the Christian Democrats and Katarina from the Social Democratic Party for us to be here, and also the co-organizers. This is a very successful proof of a cooperation, what we do with Life and Peace, Nordic Africa Institute, Kvinna till Kvinna, and PMU. I think we can all contribute to this kind of debates by bringing our our own knowledge and then our activities together. I would like to invite next, our next speaker, Pieter Vanholder. He is the country director for Life and Peace, situated in Bukavu, country director for DRC. And I think he will continue where Séverine took us. How can we support peace from the local level, and what are the activities what Life and Peace are currently undergoing in Eastern Congo? You're most welcome, Pieter.
Thank you so much, Ina, and Séverine also for launching me. I think Séverine and I, we have, or Séverine Life and Peace Institute, have a long-lasting relationship in which we try to bring out the same message and the need for much more investment in bottom-up peace building and search for deeply rooted causes. So it is always a pleasure to have you here because we are connected minds. It's very good to listen to you. So, my idea, Daria, okay. So I will briefly go through what LPI is doing and how we work and how we try to respond to that call of Séverine to invest in that bottom-up approach and try to sketch how we try to do it and how we try to work with that. But at the same time, I would like to add something to Séverine's argument. It's that the international community, when they are asked to invest in bottom-up peace building, that there are a lot of caveats to take into account. And if we don't do that, the risk of doing harm is bigger than the risk of doing nothing. The way Life and Peace tries to work is to connect analysis, dialogue, and action with each other. Every local conflict, every conflict that exists at local level, and we talk about local in DRC, we are still talking about quite massive conflicts with lots of thousands of tens of thousands of people involved. This is not about neighbors fighting for a piece of land. This is about communities being involved in long-lasting conflicts. So we try to make that link and try to analyze and deeply, thoroughly understand what a conflict is before we take action. One of the big mistakes that is often made is that we tend to understand what it's about. It's about this and this ethnic group, it's about land, so let's move and let's get into the action because things have to happen. No, a thorough analysis of the context is extremely important, not only to understand, but also to build relationships with actors on a long-term basis. Once that analysis is done, we try to encourage people to take up a dialogue, but only when they themselves are extremely ready and are ready to do it. And it is these actors themselves that are asked to create actions to get out of their conflict zone. So very often the international community tends to know what the problem is, so we also tend to know what the solutions are. And it's a very wrong approach according to us. We really think that this dialogue should happen with actors that are selected by the communities themselves, and they themselves identify what can happen to take them out of the conflict. And of course, these are small steps towards peace. These are not miracle solutions. Action can be a lot of things. It can be advocacy. Is it possible to dim the lights a little bit? I don't know if it can be done. It can be different forms of advocacy, for example, to change laws and to change policies that affect local communities. It can be specific actions. What you see here are specific signs that we use to make a demarcation of roads that cows follow when they are doing mass migration. Because the mass migration of cows in Eastern DRC is very often causing a lot of tension between farmers and pastoralists, and in a context of freely available arms, etc., it becomes a very violent conflict. It can be different forms of action. It can be the creation of community-based conflict transformation platforms or structures. These are small structures that are selected by the communities in conflict to represent themselves and to organize mediation sessions, to organize different negotiations with armed groups, etc. I will hereby represent these community-based platforms by penguins. You will later on understand why I'm using penguins to symbolize them. But it is very important to notice that these community-based platforms are selected by the communities, are given a mandate by the communities, and are the consequence of a long-term reflective process in which the parties in conflict themselves put these platforms in place in order to represent them in the follow-up of the process. Or action can also be an extra analysis, a return into an analysis, because we don't really understand everything that has been analyzed or dialogued. This is a very simple representation of the work that we try to encourage. We don't do it ourselves, Life and Peace, we do it with local partners and local NGOs that actually try to transform conflict in a longer term. These processes can easily last 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. This is perspective of conflict transformation that we're talking about. And it is something that we often make the mistake. These small conflicts, we can solve them in 2 years because they are kind of relatively comprehensive. They are not. They are extremely complex and they need time. Of course, this is processes that are not so linear and not so easy. We can go back to an analysis after a dialogue because we thought it wasn't really ready to go into action, or something can happen along the road in the process. When we are talking 5 years, 6 years of analysis, of course things happen. New violence bursts out, etc., which makes us readjust our process, etc. So what I'm trying to say here is that we need to be very adaptive and very flexible in these processes. Let's not say, okay, this is the structure, this is what we have in mind, so let's do it that way. It's not up to us to impose a methodology. It is a methodology that shapes itself by the conflict actors, by the communities, by the people involved. They tell us, stop. We cannot go into a dialogue phase because we are not ready. We are not ready to sit around the table with that other community. And then we go back and we follow them. We follow their lead. It is not up to us to determine the lead. I'm getting somewhere with this. If you allow me, Séverine, I'm going to contradict you a little bit when you say that this is not really backed up by the international community right now. This process or this system or this way of thinking is increasingly slipping into donor and international community discourses. It is due to the fact that I4S, at a certain point, I4S is the stabilization plan from the United Nations. We're evaluating their previous phase. They realized, well, actually, we haven't really done a lot. We have invested a lot in infrastructure, etc. They have evaluated their stabilization plan and finally came to the conclusion that there was not sufficient support from the bases, from the communities, etc. So we should give that more attention. And since the last 2 or 3 years, the stabilization plan is trying to bring that under the attention, these comprehensive processes in which actions are defined by the people in conflict themselves. Mary Robinson, the previous UN Special Envoy for the Great Lakes region, was also very much in favor of implicating civil society actors and bottom-up processes, etc. So what I'm trying to say is that this system, or this way of thinking, or this process has gained momentum and has received more and more attention. The question marks, I'm not going to go into them because it will lead me too far, and I know that Ina is quite strict in time management. So what I'm trying to say is that with I4S and with Mary Robinson, this process has received more funds than previously. And previously there was a very much bottom-up approach and vision on peace building. It is slightly shifting. What I'm trying to I'm not going to use the word warn, but one of the biggest caveats here is that a lot of what we see happening now in the last 2 years is that the money is more and more going into the action part. Basically what we see is that we are getting a projectization of this process. This is a very long-term process, but we see that there's a pressure from the international community to narrow down a very long-term complex process into a process in which we focus on action and the analysis and dialogue part is scaled down. And what we see actually is that we simplify a participatory action research process or a bottom-up peace-building process into the creation of penguins. More and more community-based platforms are put in place as the solution to peace building. What is the conflict in Eastern DRC? Well, it's about communities, it's about land, it's about identity, so let's create local peace-building platforms so they can solve it. Of course, that is a very simplified and not very thought-through reasoning. Because the international community and the donors that are actually listening to our calls, that way go for quick and easily identifiable results. These community-based platforms. They are pushing more and more for quantitative indicators, for the measurables. How many community-based platforms have been put in place? How many conflicts have they transformed? Yeah, well, what is a conflict? And I mean, if you solve a conflict between two farmers that are discussing about their fields and where is the border of one field and another, check, I have transformed the conflict. But of course, if at the same time you're investing in a conflict between Burundi and Bafulero in the Plaine de la Ruzizi about traditional chiefdom and succession, of course it's a very different type of conflict, and you will invest much more time and energy in that, but it will always still count as a check, one conflict. The quality has to be much more taken into account. And so what we get are far less in-depth processes in which analysis is not thoroughly done, but it becomes a process of 2 or 3 months to understand, and 2 or 3 months is a lot in this reasoning. It becomes far less long-term because we have a project, we go from January to December, and in December we would like to have the results. So let's do it, let's take 2 weeks analysis, a dialogue, and then go into the action part. And of course, it becomes far less participatory with this type of reasoning. What you get to see is we have organized 3 focus groups, so we have done a participatory process, which of course is not the case. A participatory process is a process that is driven by the conflict actors and the communities. So this way you get a simplification of a PAR, and as a consequence, this process becomes a top-down process rather than a bottom-up process. We still call it bottom-up, we still call it this is community-driven, but it is completely the opposite. We also get the attention on certain zones. You have this announcement of donors and international community that we want to focus on Fizi, Uvira, Masisi, and Beni for the coming 3 years, and we have this amount of millions available. The consequence is that everybody wants to work in these zones because this is the zones where there are funds available, but then there's a lot of other zones that are in equal amount of conflict that don't receive attention. There are local organizations that can actually do that work very well, and we support some of them, some of our partners. But of course, if everybody wants to work with these organizations, they get an over-demand, and these organizations get a reduction in quality because they want to do as much as possible in shorter term. And then you get even perverser effects, and in a very politically incorrect manner, I refer to it as the sexual violencization of bottom-up peace building, which basically means that what you saw when sexual violence became a buzz for the international community and for the donor community, you saw an enormous amount of opportunistic actions that were not driven by an authentic concern for the victims of sexual violence, but they were there because funds were available. Organizations were created, and I saw with my own eyes that people were fighting for their victim of sexual violence. We saw her first because she represented money. So you get very opportunistic actions and even opportunistic creations of organizations, and that becomes a very dangerous business, of course. And then these CT platforms, these penguins that I talked to you about, they are supposed to be representatives of their communities. They are accountable to their communities. They are accountable only to the people who have put them there. And that is the reason why they exist, not because the international community says we need to create these community-driven platforms. So when international actors try to pinpoint these CT platforms, conflict transformation platforms, and they tell them, look, we have $50,000 available for you to implement a project, and these organizations say yes, or these platforms say yes, they become NGOs. They are no longer community-based platforms. They are no longer accountable to their communities. And the consequence is that these things, at a certain point, can in turn create conflict again. And we have seen that happening a lot in the latest time. So what I'm trying to say here, and I'm gonna finish, is yes, of course, international community, and yes, of course, donors, and yes, of course, Séverine. We need this. We need that there is a constant investment in these long-term, difficult, bottom-up driven processes. But let's try to do it in a manner that we don't do harm, because if we do it with harm, it's better to do nothing. Let's try to not lose out of sight the complexity of these processes. They take time, they take investment, they take research, and they have no simple, clear-cut, basic solutions. Let's create less buzz. Let's try to invest as an international community in what we see that is happening, that is authentic, but let's not say we have 50 million available for this kind of thing. And let's support real coordination. There's a lot of things that are happening, there's a lot of overlap between the different actions, so let's make sure that this coordination remains authentic, and there I would almost be inclined to plead for the I4S system as an overall system that is actually working towards this stabilization of Eastern DRC with an emphasis on bottom-up peacebuilding. All this in order not to throw away the polar bear with the iceberg. Thank you very much.
Well, a lot of images come to mind when we think of DRC, but first time I've seen it with penguins. So, indeed, and I'm also happy to hear that we already have the first argument here. You said you do disagree with Séverine in some of the questions, so I think that is already a good basis for further discussion and see how we can already get closer to each other, or can we? We have, I have the toughest job here, as usual. I'm trying to keep this seminar in order when it comes to time, but it doesn't mean that I wouldn't appreciate everybody's efforts, but we have to respect each other. So when I open this for discussion, then please remember that we have now sharply 50 minutes left in our program. Before we open for the discussion, I would like to invite our panelists, another three ladies. You see, we are very gender balanced, but we are very well represented when it comes to women here. We have three wonderful ladies coming to give us their view. As of course, one of the ideas of this seminar is, after listening to the international experts, Séverine and our man on the ground, we would like to hear now from both the Foreign Affairs of Sweden and Sida. What are their views as regards to conflict in Congo and conflict resolution mechanism and support? And then we also have Maria Eriksson Baaz, who is the researcher at the Nordic Africa Institute, also very well-known Congo expert. So I will call upon all our panelists. First, Eva Areskoug, who is Deputy Director of Great Lakes Desk in Africa Department of Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I think you would like to speak here or over there? Or yes, have a seat, yeah. And I think it's easy, we get everybody in here now. Our other lady there is Elisabeth Hedin, who is a senior policy specialist on human security in Sida. And then we have Maria Eriksson Baaz, who is, as I told you, well-known Congo specialist working at the Nordic Africa Institute. We will start in that order, which I already announced. We would like to hear first from Eva. What are your thoughts as regards to the previous speakers, and how can the Swedish Foreign Affairs be part of the, not part of the problem, part of the solution in Eastern Congo? Yes. Thank you. I will be standing here, so.
Okay, thank you. It's on. First of all, thank you for inviting the Minister of Foreign Affairs. I come from the Africa Department, work on the Great Lakes desk, and I'm impressed by the crowd here. I'm humble. Also, I know there's a lot of knowledge here about the DRC, long-term knowledge. And thank you for the two speakers. I think it's very useful for us working at the ministry level to get your insight and learn from your experience and knowledge in the field also. It's a great contribution to our policy work at the ministry. It's really appreciated, and I think it's this exchange of views here will be very useful for us in the continuous work for the DRC. And when it comes to the DRC and working on the local level and the importance of the local conflicts that you're talking about and involving the local actors. I mean, we do agree. I mean, from the Swedish side, there's no contradiction how we work and our views on that. We are in DRC working both at the micro level that you're talking much about, but also at the macro level. We think that both levels has to be approached, but also linked, and that's the challenge, I think, to try to combine these two ways of supporting. One support we give at the macro level is a support to the major reform program in the justice sector that will help, hopefully, to create the framework, the judicial framework in DRC, which also in the end will help at the micro level. But we are also providing support at the micro level to organizations like Life and Peace, also International Alert, and my colleague from Sida here will talk a little bit more on that. But I also want to say that Sweden's being part of the international community, we also have to relate what's happening in the bigger world, I mean, in the region. And now, for instance, we have elections coming up in the DRC, local and regional elections this fall, and presidential elections next year. I mean, that's something that's creating tension and unrest, and we have to relate to that. We also now, the latest week, we have unrest in Burundi that some of you might be following. How will that maybe spill over to the DRC? How will that impact on the region? We also have the continuous conflicts in the eastern part of the DRC, where MONUSCO now is also having the dialogue with the government, and the government forces is not on the best terms. But we have to work on that dialogue so MONUSCO can get a proper role, an important role they have in Eastern DRC. So those are things we also have to, from the government side, think into our work, or the big picture working with DRC. But when it comes to working with peace building and conflict resolution in DRC, I also want to say that the resolution 1325, women, peace and security, that's a central theme in everything we do. Not least this year, when it's 15 years since the resolution was decided on. And that's a theme going through all our work. And how I mentioned before, the link to link what we're doing locally and also on a bigger picture is one challenge that we see is to work locally with UN, which is a partner, how to get the UN to work better with the local perspective. I mean, and there we as a donor, we have a role, try to work on that and create that link. It's not always easy, but we are trying to do that constantly. And another way to work on that is to work in, for instance, in New York, where Sweden is now chairing the UN Peacebuilding Commission, which is a body in the UN. And also there we can work on a bigger level, trying to talk about the local dimension and impose that. So that's something we can do from the government side. But a few words about Swedish engagement in DRC. Some of you might know that we are now preparing a new development strategy, for a 5-year strategy for development cooperation in DRC. We foresee a decision before the summer, and there it will be a part of peace and security, which is now also in the current strategy, but that's something that Sweden will continue to be engaged in. I also want to say that development cooperation can create a great impact, but we also have to work at political level in dialogue with government representatives in DRC. And we can do that on a bilateral basis, Sweden towards the government, but also, which is most useful, is to work with others, not least in the EU context, try to convey our messages to the politicians in DRC. So development cooperation has to go hand in hand with what we do on the political side. And you mentioned what Sweden can do for DRC. And I just want to end to say that I think Sweden has done, is doing a lot for DRC. I mean, we have a great amount of development cooperation and also humanitarian aid. Of course, we have to improve. I mean, we have to make sure it's effective. We have to work with others to make an impact, of course. But I also want to stress that the DRC government also have the primary responsibility. Let's not forget that they are in the driver's seat for development in the country, and Sweden and other donors, we can only, support these efforts. So just want to mention that also in this context. But like Desiree Petrus, you mentioned in the beginning, I mean, there are good, promising things also with the DRC. The country has great potential, not least when it comes to natural resources. And once stabilized and more democratic and on the right way, I mean, it could be an economic superpower in the region. I mean, so let's not lose that perspective. I mean, there is hope somewhere in the tunnel. So just want to end with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eva. And Elisabeth Hedin will tell us from Sida. Yes.
Yes, thanks a lot. I can see you around. I can see faces here.
Voila. Thanks. I can see, I mean, many colleagues sitting here, and I think we all know that aid in these contexts is very risky and very challenging. As we have heard here, there is a huge risk that we might come in with very good intentions. We want to do good, but we even risk doing harm. And I think that is one key concept that I work with as a policy specialist within Sida, on how we can ensure that our engagement in these very complex contexts, but actually are based on a very context-based analysis, and that we see how we can be as effective and relevant as possible and avoid doing harm. So it's a very challenging task, but I would like to share with you some of the key messages based on the presentations we've heard that I would like to send from how we try to work on this from a very practical point of view then as a development agency. And I mean, the need for conflict analysis on macro, meso and micro level is key. We all know that without that, we really risk doing harm. And we know that there is sometimes a tendency from the international community, as you were saying, to have a bit of a blueprint and want to do things quickly, see quick results, and then moving too quickly and then doing harm. So just to share with you two very concrete examples how we try as a dialogue partner and as a funder in DRC to avoid that kind of approach. 5-6 years ago, we were planning a new support to a large UN fund focusing on early recovery for internally displaced people. And we raised as a donor, so how do you take in the conflict perspective? In particular then thinking about the risk for local conflicts, that we accentuate these conflicts or that we create new tensions and conflicts. And the large UN actor was initially saying, oh, well, that's beyond our control. We're just helping the people, we're just doing this early recovery things. So that was a bit of a long, actually, debate and a dialogue that we as a donor needed to continuously in several meetings and push this partner to see that it's not only service delivery. You move into a context where conflicts are at different levels present, and you need to take that into account. And after several sessions and discussions, it actually, and a few years down the line, actually, it ended up in a program that was not only service delivery focused, but also working with peace building as a goal, and in that way working on the conflict and working on concrete drivers of conflict. So that is a very concrete example where we as a donor, even if we're not one of the largest ones in the DRC, we all know that volume-wise, Sweden is small compared to many others like the EU and the US. But I think that kind of voice, I think it's important, and we try to do that and be that voice in the community. And the other example I wanted to raise was the fact that we have now seen that linked to the Common Humanitarian Fund, conflict sensitivity as a cross-cutting theme was all of a sudden not there anymore. I mean, we all know that. I mean, humanitarian assistance, there are so many examples of how the humanitarian assistance might do harm despite all the endeavors of doing good. So that is also one of the key issues that we then, sitting in the advisory board in Kinshasa and having a strategic voice and trying to raise and make sure that this perspective comes in as a clear cross-cutting theme again. So that was, I mean, two quite concrete examples of how we, in our daily work in Kinshasa, try to raise these issues. And one other message is the portfolio balance perspective. We need to fund then larger UN actors who can have large programs. But we are, of course, combining it with other actors, like, for example, Life and Peace Institute, who have more of a very solid, as Pieter eloquently described, a very locally based approach. And what we then see, having that bit of balance in our portfolio with larger UN, World Bank actors, and then these smaller INGO support, our role is to help you, as Eva was referring to, also to feed your analysis and your perspectives into the larger system in the donor community. So we see that as a key role. On the results agenda, I mean, Pieter, that you were referring to, I sense that within the donor community, we have had a bit of too much focus on value for money and quantitative indicators. I think we have seen that that does not really lead us very far in terms of conflict transformation. So I sense that there is a bit of a refocus and focusing more on qualitative indicators. And of course, it's important for us as a donor to see results of the organizations we're funding. It's not that. We cannot get away with saying, no, it's too complex, peacebuilding is so complex, so we cannot focus on results. But for us, it's very much more focusing on qualitative results and theories of change, and how then actors like LPI can have perhaps show then short-term, medium, and long-term results, and very much qualitative results, not the number of meetings or the number of people showing up at meetings. Regular visits to the East. The embassy is actually very ambitious and travel very regularly. It seems like quite a basic thing, but I think it's really key to remember. We need to travel out to the context and not only get the capital perspective on things. And then, as I've already been referring to, I think being a voice of that local perspective, I think in Kinshasa is what I can see as a key role of embassy colleagues, both Ministry of MFA colleagues and Sida colleagues. Yeah, so that was my, I think the time is out now. So, and thanks a lot. I think this was just a few examples, but for us, these kind of events is really a key opportunity for us to also learn and see how we can do even better as a donor and bringing your perspectives down to our programming. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisabeth. By the way, if you see people here busy with their mobile phones or other gadgets, it only means that we are live tweeting and live reporting. So you can follow handle Nordic Africa, handle LPI, or handle Séverine AR, or hashtag DRC. If you feel like you want to have a multidimensional entrance to this particular event, as many of us nowadays do. So I'm also here with my mobile, so don't take it as an offense if I look at it sometimes. The final speaker, comments from the Maria Eriksson Baaz, and then I will open it for the audience.
Thank you. Is it on?
Yes.
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 Now it's on. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. It is? This? No. It's red? This? This? No? No? No?
I was wondering when will the technical problem start, because we've been very successful until now. So please, go ahead, Maria.
Okay, now I think, now I hear the difference as well. I'm very happy to be here, so thank you for inviting me, even if I'm one of the organizers as well here, being a part of the Nordic Africa Institute. So I'm a researcher, so that's where I'm coming in here, and I've been working on various issues in the Congo, mainly defense reform, civil-military relations, trying to understand violence against civilians committed by the state armed forces, including sexual violence. So that's where I come from in this. And I should start saying that I agree much with Pieter, especially with Pieter also since I worked on sexual violence. I've seen what happens and the problems, what happens when you put all the money in one basket, which has created a lot of problems in the Congo. So I can see that happening in this field as well. I also agree with Séverine on her analysis, and I totally agree that it's important to work more on the local level and local conflicts. And we also see, and too little has been done before, I also see that now we have the local elections coming up this year, which will also probably increase tensions on the local level, which even more point to the need to work on local level conflicts. And I'm not sure I really disagree, or that we disagree, but still I would like to emphasize that it's equally dangerous to think that everything can be solved by local level initiatives, and I think also that Séverine agrees with me. But I think maybe to add to what you're saying, that I think we need to understand that local level conflicts do not automatically transform into violence. And most of the time what we've seen in the Congo is that different political and military leaders are instrumentalizing these grievances and also using it for their own interest. Whether it's the military leaders from the Mai Mai or from different Rwandan groups, we see the same things. So this is very much connected to other processes. And we've seen that also in our research on the army, how the military integration process and the handling of the military is creating local conflicts in the kivus. So the local is very much connected to national processes, so it cannot be separated. So for that reason, I will also emphasize, now I'm actually agreeing a lot with Séverine in the sense that the international community tend to focus a bit too much on elections as the solution to things. But I would say that we are actually at the crucial moment now, where even I would say that we need to engage in this issue and also put resources here. We have the presidential elections coming up next year. And I think that I have previously been one of those who have said that when people have been worried in 2006, 2011, saying we will see large-scale violence and so on, I would say, no, it's not going to be a problem. There are going to be protests, but, it will not transform into large-scale conflict. And we saw that also in the 2011 elections, even though there was a lot of fraud, you had demonstrations, you had clashes, but there was nothing that actually came into to sort of larger scales of violence. But I think that in addition to risking having an undemocratic government, and that he has even less legitimacy if the government or the current president is able to rewrite the constitution or delay, we also risk large-scale violence, considering the conflicts already existing and also the fragmented political landscape here. So for that reason, I think it's really crucial to engage in this issue and also to put some funding in it. And I mean, the elections are extremely expensive. I think it's $1.6 billion totally with the local and other the elections. But maybe then to put in certain crucial areas like perhaps voter registration, etc. But then also I would then, which we did not talk about so far so much, but to recognize the regional drivers of conflict as well. And where the military victory against the M23 a few years back was partly a result of a more effective armed forces and the international backing from the UN, it was also a result of the international community putting pressure on Rwanda to stop the support to this group. And there are now rumors that some of you maybe have heard of a new insurgency possibly supported by Rwanda and Uganda coming up now in Eastern Congo. It's purely rumors, but we need to keep in mind that this is a possibility and that we also need to work on the regional level. So I think my message is that yes, the local is important, but it's connected to the national, and we need to work at all these different levels simultaneously and not sort of think that one is a solution. And also to perhaps end with a bit of hope, and not just saying that there is hope for the Congo or that it's potential, but also think that could be important to recognize the achievements made. We tend to be very negative always and point to the Congo as a failure, nothing happened. And I might be working in the Congo for 10 years and lived there for even longer, and I always hear that, oh, it's never been worse than this, yeah? But there's been tremendous achievements and I should add, we have shrinking democratic space, we have continuing conflict, but we still see achievements in terms of that since the M23 was militarily defeated, that's the first time since the war started that we do not have a Rwandan-supported armed group in the Congo. That is a huge achievement. We also have, in terms of defense reform, we see that the army is much more effective now than it was 5 years ago, also less human rights abuses. We see it in terms of state administration, even if that is extremely imperfect, but the improvement in payments of salaries, in terms of economic growth, etc. There are several indicators where actually we can see achievements. So let's not forget that, but particularly not let that investment fail by not continue to engage.
Thank you, Maria. Yeah, I think it's a very good message that, you know, there has been achievements, there is progress, and now it's good to continue building on those achievements and that progress is on all those levels we've discussed here, on the bottom, on the grassroots level, and then also on international engagements. I would like to now open the floor for questions and comments. And before you say your question, which hopefully will be short, you also say who you are and who you represent. I don't need your CV, but briefly, so that we know on what position you are presenting. Yes, please. Yes, please, Desiree. Do we have a mic somewhere?
Okay, I just want to, because you give different perspectives, of course, and that's, I mean, the perspective from the Foreign Office is, of course, more on a national or more international level, and you're in the local level. So for us politicians, how should we see upon it? In my perspective, I think we need to have an approach to work both locally, but also national and internationally. So could you just give a brief comment and maybe from the Séverine and from you, Pieter?
Yeah, I've been told I need to repeat your question, which so how do the politicians can have an influence in all these levels, what were mentioned? And she would like Séverine and Pieter to respond. Before we go, they let them have a little bit of a think through. Any other questions right now? Yes, please, there and there. And is there no way of having a mic somewhere? No. Can we, you can come here if you don't mind. I think that because we're recording it, so for me to repeat it, yes, please, you're most welcome.
Thank you. Christian Alpeter from Folkebund Academy. You all mentioned the importance of both levels, the international, the local, and the regional in between. I would just like to hear more about how you would go about actually making sure that they speak to each other so that there are not so many more penguins that don't talk to each other. Or, and we heard it from Sida, the balance within the portfolio, but how do you make sure that this happens on the bigger level and not only within one donor agency?
Yes, and there was a lady there, and people on this side could use this mic if it was working. No, it's not.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for your presentations. I would like for some of the participants to answer me what is the role of the Congolese civil society in this bottom-up approach, and if in the Swedish new strategy, if there is any capacity building or empowering Congolese civil society that you're considering. I have a third question regarding current efforts to guarantee some sort of more security or in the local elections in 2015 from the Swedish government or voter registration. So how does the Swedish government see the building capacity ahead of the presidential elections, if there's any effort towards it? Thank you.
Thank you. I think we start with those 3 questions. Séverine, would you like to start, please? Oh, okay, Pieter. Yes, sure.
Some gender balance. Thank you for these questions. I think they all link up very much. I think they are very much related, and so I'm going to try to formulate an answer to all 3 of them at once. I think one of the big mistakes about what Séverine and I are actually advocating for, which is the same thing, is that we are advocating for a bottom-up perspective. And very quickly people tend to simplify that to a bottom perspective. We are not talking about bottom. We're not talking about top. We're talking about bottom-up instead of top-down, which is very different. Everything has to include all levels. It's a very big challenge, and what we're trying to do here is to include all levels. I'm not saying that we succeed perfectly, but every local conflict has ramifications at provincial, national, and sometimes even regional level. It has ramifications at social, military, and economic level. And the challenge that we try to overcome is to combine all these levels, both content-wise as track 3 to 1-wise. How can we do that? For example, we try to involve all different actors from the different levels in the process. When we try to do the analysis, we don't only talk to local leaders of armed groups. We don't only talk to local civil society. We don't only talk to local church leaders or local women groups. We try to talk to people from the military, from the army at provincial level. We try to talk to the governor. We try to involve ministers that are involved because of the content. For example, the national land minister is often invited to our processes, the Minister of Interior Affairs, etc. So, senators that are linked to the communities, parliamentarians that are linked to the communities, they are all invited, not only in the analysis phase, also in the dialogue phase and to the extent possible in the action phase. So some of the actions that are defined by the communities locally need a change of law. For example, the land reform process that has been announced for a few years in DRC is something that we can try to weigh on with the local voice and try to bring it to the national voice by using these parliamentarians from the communities themselves to weigh on the reform process. And I think that kind of answers the question from Christian to a certain extent. I would like to add that everything, I'm not trying to promote Life and Peace Institute, but what I'm trying to promote a process here. It's everything that we do is not Life and Peace. It is our local partners. It is partners from the Congolese society. And the only thing that LPI does is build their capacity. We are constantly working, reflecting with them on how to streamline these processes and how to react to them. So it is not, LPI is an international actor intervening, it's LPI supporting local actors trying to do it. We use the terminology professional centers for conflict transformation. This is our dream, that local organizations become so professional that at a certain point LPI can step out and everything is driven by the local organizations. It's supported and accompanied by the local organizations. I would like to make one more point with regard to that, with regard to this linking of these different stages, and it came up amongst others with the intervention of the panelists. Yes, there is UN agencies, and yes, there is the government, etc., but there is a lack of linkages between these different levels, and I think right now there is an opportunity. I have to start to pay attention, not to become an advocate for another agency rather than for my organization. But I really think that there is a huge potential with I4S. I4S is ISSSS. It's an international support strategy for security and stabilization in Congo. It is actually the international part of a stabilization plan, together with STAREC, which is the national part, which is the government. And right now, I4S is really making an effort to streamline these processes of bottom-up peace building in the real sense of the word. But they have an enormous amount of obstacles. They are blocked by other UN agencies, they are blocked by the government, and sometimes they are blocked by donors. So I think that if we could recognize that there is one central body that could actually coordinate all these linkages between the different levels, we would get tremendously far already. And I really would like to go deeper into that, but I know I shouldn't right now.
Thank you, Séverine. And indeed, what you said, Pieter, I think this strengthening and hoping in the future the local level or local organization would take the lead, or we wouldn't be needed, but that's, I think, the basic philosophy of the whole development aid and external intervention. But now, yes, please.
I'll transfer the 3 questions at the same time because... Thank you. The 3 questions are indeed very, very connected. So how do we work both locally, nationally, internationally? How do we connect everything? Well, the first thing is that international actors, I think, shouldn't think that we have the answer to Congolese problems and come and impose our solutions. And that's very much what we've been doing for the 15 years very often, is arriving, whether at the national or international levels, or sometimes at the local level, and arriving and thinking that we know what should be done because we have a good analysis of conflict, and then imposing our solutions, and then that backfires. And that's how we end up doing more harm than good, whether we're talking about local conflict resolution or international conflict resolution. So when Pieter and I think, are talking about bottom up, the idea is very much to involve parties in conflict in the dialogue, in the design and in the planning of the peace building efforts. And that's why I think that's what we can take as an idea and as a guiding principle when we're talking about local, national, regional, international involvements. So locally, how to help locally, that's not have the international donors, NGOs, diplomats resolve local conflicts directly, because we don't know how to do that. None of us has the expertise. It's really follow what LPI is doing and get the analysis, get the perspective from the different parties, and then ask them what kind of solutions they want. And that's where the role of civil society is so important, because they should be a part of most of this dialogue process, or all of this dialogue process, because they are very much a part of the solutions to all of these local, national, international conflicts. So what are the role for international actors in this different process? Well, from what I've been hearing is international actors can have resources, can provide a lot of logistic and financial resources. They can provide expertise sometimes, which is very important, ideas on things that have worked in other conflict zones and that could be helpful to try in Congo, to adapt in Congo. They can provide a safe space for interaction and for dialogue. And they can, what's most important, they can link the different levels. They can link the local conflict resolution efforts with the provincial, with the national, with the international. Because as both Pieter and Maria were saying, all of the local conflicts have national, provincial, well, not all of the local conflicts, but many of the important local conflicts have provincial, national repercussions. And at the same time, as Maria was saying, a lot of the national and international conflicts have local repercussions. So we need to link all of these efforts, and local actors very often, they say that they do not have the capacity, or they do not have the same kind of access that donors or diplomats or United Nations representatives have. So that's really one of the things that we can do, is to help make the link with the more macro level, building up from the micro perspective. But for that, I think what's really important, and it goes back to the idea of imposition, for that we need to have the kind of process that LPI was describing, having the analysis first and action later. Because very often when we think about linking up, when we think about intervening, we want to do something very quickly. And we want to have quick results because we see people are dying. So of course we want to stop the fighting. But surprisingly, and it's not only in Congo, but in many other conflict zones, local people who are themselves the victims of violence, sometimes they argue, they ask for a slower international response, and they ask for people to think before acting and to analyze and to really understand the conflict and the causes of violence before trying to address them. And to me, that's very much linked to what Pieter was saying. We shouldn't jump into action, whether we're talking about local conflict resolution or national or international, but we should first have an analysis that includes all of the parties to the conflict and the external observers and the civil society representatives, and then only take actions to try to do the best thing that has has been suggested and approved by the different parties to the conflict.
Thank you. And then there was this question how Sweden can assist in local elections, and would you, both Eva and Elisabeth, shortly?
Okay, first I'd like to answer also on the new strategy, and if civil society is included there in capacity building. And I just want to say it's still a draft, so I mean I cannot say what it will come out, but yes, civil society organizations are important in DRC. I mean, so capacity building will be part of the strategy. I cannot say exactly how or so, but of course it will be part of it. And when it comes to support to local elections this year, there's no decision, and now I'm looking at Sida for you can assist me later on. No decision has been made. There's a lot of discussion going on in Kinshasa among the donors, how to relate to the local elections, but also the elections next year. And like you said, Maria, you're talking about engaging. I mean, but also the risk for not engaging, but also the risk if we engage, because then we can also be associated with an election that's maybe not fair, credible, and so on. And we have the experience from last elections when we gave support and the turnout was a little bit so-and-so. So, but there is discussion going on. Sweden is looking at this possibility, but no decision has been made so far about that. Thank you.
Would you like to add something, Elisabeth?
I have nothing to add on the election. I think it's really no, take this one instead. Voila. Nothing to add on the election support, but on the importance of supporting Congolese civil society, I think it's really part of our overall strategy when we select partners. As I said, we need to combine our portfolio, choosing more of strategic partners like the UN, who have more systemic approach. But one of the key questions for us if in our dialogue is, of course, to see how do they enable the local, normally the local Congolese organization and communities that actually do the work out there, furthest out in the implementation chain. So that is one thing, that it's a key dialogue. We also have a support to civil society fund together with other like-minded donors to have a bit of a coordinated approach from like-minded donors and more of a strategic approach, I think enabling also less fragmented support to civil society organization, which is of course key, as you were referring to. Sometimes when donors come in with different envelopes, it creates a lot of tensions and competition that is not always beneficial for the results we're actually striving towards. So that is one way of supporting the Congolese civil society, more indirectly through middlemen, but always a focus on that. And just also another comment on trying to also focus on the Congolese capacity in our health sector. We have large programs, primarily then through INGO and the UN, but one key focus is to very actively involve the Congolese health administration staff at the very local level. So we have that perspective very much into our programming and the design of the program of our partners. Yes, I think I stop there.
Good. There is two short interventions. There's one gentleman there, and then there's a lady to give us a way forward. And then yes, please come forward.
Hello, thank you for the time you give to us, and you invite us in this conference. We are from Congo Moko, which is an organization of Congolese people who are established in Sweden. We are trying all our best to change the situation in our country, but seeing what is happening, actually, I think it's very bad for the people of Congo. We are not only the first ones, we are many, not only in Sweden, we are everywhere. We are almost in each country, every countries of, we say in diaspora, the people who are living abroad. But seeing how my sisters and my brothers sitting here, I think I would like to, next time maybe to advise you guys a little bit. Your organizations are doing very well, but if next time we could see Congolese sitting among you people, it will be very positive, because you know about the history of Africa. In Congo also, there were some European guys that were in Germany sitting around the table and deciding how Africa should be cut part by part, and this have provoked many conflicts until now. So we actually we like what you're doing, but what we have to do is to stop the water from the top. I think the problem of Congo is not what we are seeing about the conflicts, which you're saying that is the conflicts of people, or maybe for, I don't know, the tribes or something. The problem of Congo, first of all, is the head of Congo, which is leading Congo right now. You know what happened in 2006? Kabila did not win elections against Jean-Pierre Bemba. Yeah. And then in 2011, the same thing happened. I think you sent the people who were there to see what was happening with elections there. Tshisekedi, who was the leader of opposition, won elections. It's finished?
Yes.
We don't have time. If you can help us also next time so that you can hear from the Congolese people also.
We are very happy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we close, this is not the end of a process, this is a beginning of the process. I will ask, yes, you wanted to tell us how this continues.
Because we said there would be a continuation of it, and we're proposing a round table.
Closer to the mic.
So the organizers have proposed to see this as a first step and then have a second step as a round table where we can further discuss the role of Sweden, what Sweden can do further to support actually stable peace in the DRC. And it's suggested that will be in September, 2nd of September. So we'll keep you informed about that, and invite you all to come and participate.
And definitely we will make sure Congo Moko and the other Congolese living here are also part of the program preparations. Now, time flies when we're having fun and learning new things. It's about exactly 14:25 as we planned to finish this, because as you remember, we are in the Parliament building and there are other things happening here. On my behalf, I really would like to thank our fantastic speakers and our fantastic audience, and like I said, this will continue, as long as there is a need for, engagement with the DRC. I'm sure the organizations involved here, and then hopefully the Swedish government, the parliament will continue organizing this kind of events and hope for the best for the future of Congo. Now I will invite Katarina Köhler from the Social Democratic Party Parliamentary Group to close this session.
Thank you. Yes, I will say a few closing words. Starting to a big thank you to all of you. We had a very interesting points in many ways, and also a big thank you to you in the audience, of course. And you all contribute to making this seminar a very good one, I think. If I could decide, I would have sit here all day and talking about peace building and Congo and how we together can reach what we really want to happen. But as you said, this is a start, and we will meet again. Hopefully we will meet again and continue the discussions about these important issues. And even if we don't agree in every part of this, I feel, and I feel sure of the fact that we all want the best. We all want the best for Congo. We all want the best for a good process in the peace building, a process that will be sustainable and will be as good as it really can be for the people in Congo. So I thank you for coming and for participating, and I look forward to have a new meeting about these issues. So thank you very much.